back.
I am.
You're back.
I'm very happy to be back.
Welcome back to Sundance. You keep the cards really close to the chest of your protagonist. She's very much in an insular world, and her charm is so hard to explain. But you don't care to explain it. I was wondering what kind of exploratory work you did prior to penning the screenplay.
So, I had a dream. I was really depressed because this film that I've been trying to make since my last film that I kept on getting stopped because I kept on getting pregnant was basically every time it would almost happen, then I'd be pregnant again. Finally, I wasn't pregnant, and I had Paul Webster producing, and we had a great cast, and it just couldn't get made. And I'm a real fighter, but I just sort of was like, Jesus. Paul was like, you know what, Zeina, you're just gonna have to make something else, and we're gonna get this made, but afterwards. And that night, I went to bed, and I had this really intense dream about a girl walking in LUXOR. I'd been to LUXOR when I was a kid, but I don't really know why it was LUXOR, but it kind of just like, this whole thing was almost written through tapping into this, like I told you previously, like tapping into this kind of like, I was just kind of in a trance when I wrote it. And it came from somewhere really deep, like somewhere that you probably would find in like therapy or something, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was very quiet, which is completely unlike me because I'm a real joker and I love laughing. And Imperialists is more who I am on a daily basis. So I thought, okay, this is quite a mature thing. Where am I going with this? But what I loved was I loved the image, right? So I love the image so much, like, and so that really drove it. I kind of watched her, and I went through. I just played it out in my head a lot, and then I went to LUXOR, and I was completely on my own. And my producer came for one night to say hi, basically to like meet me properly and go over what I'd done. We had dinner, but I was really just walking around these places on my own. And the thing about the MENA region is that there's just so much war and chaos everywhere you go, and yet you have these very still moments in these really ancient sites. So Jordan is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you're literally 45 minutes away from like terror, and yet on the Syrian border, and yet you could be in a yoga class, you could go for a picnic in a Roman ruin with your parents, and then, because my parents lived there, and then, you know, suddenly I sometimes get major anxiety attacks when I'm there, because I'm like, this is just like so still, and yet like it could just go any minute. I don't know how to explain that fragility.
Well, I get a sense that you like something like a room that's full, and not by necessarily people, but just full of stuff or ideas or energy, and so the anxiety that you felt is that this person is the main character is living very much a solitary experience in her head.
Yes.
She's surrounded by people, things.
Yes.
And
it's just, yes, exactly. And I think through the following her quietly, that's how we did it. Like the script was literally, and that's what Andrea talks about space. She goes to her room, she puts her bag down, she sits on the bed, she has a shower, she comes out, she walks the ruin, she buys a ticket. It was this rhythm, which is like, it was, again, like this rhythm was really important for me. Now, it's great to shoot it, but then when you edit it, something else happens. But I think in that rhythm, you give the actors a kind of freedom to
explore
stay,
those boundaries.
To stay, and also have this existential crisis, because they're constantly just toing and froing in this quiet way. So that's kind of how I came up with that, I think. Again, it was all very instinctual. I like myself probably, you know, like I don't know how to explain it, but I guess a lot of it was coming from stuff I'd picked up as a child, or like my parents left Beirut. My mom was born in like Palestine in 48. Then we had the Bosnian Civil War. My grandmother sought asylum. Like, I've been around a lot of this energy. My dad ran the Middle East desk for United Press International. So like literally since I was tiny, I just heard all these stories and felt, it's like the energy you feel.
Yeah, displacement.
Yeah, displacement massively, war, like the pain. So it's funny that like I'm always really interested in it secondhand, because that's my experience. It's never like in in the place. I've never like been somewhere which is in a war, but I've always experienced war like one degree out. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm really interested, because that's where people, when they, I don't know, like someone like this doctor, you know, she goes to LUXOR and that's what she's experiencing. But I went to the Ramtha border, the Syrian border to Ramtha, where the Doctors Without Borders had a clinic, and I interviewed all the doctors there. And that was a really intense experience. And it wasn't for this project, it was for another project.
Okay.
And I just, they were very generous, and I interviewed the nurses and the doctors, and I kind of now know sort of what the questions I want to ask are. So I've like, so what's been going on in your life recently that made you come to this area to do this?
Yeah.
Someone had lost their dad, someone was going through a divorce. They all had some like big life, and they were all unaware of their manicness when they spoke. They were brilliant. They were like putting their lives online, but like there was things that when they spoke to you, but you could tell they were under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And they weren't aware of it. And I feel like often when you're in that situation, you're unaware. So it's always like,
because you're working with instinct, you're not thinking, you're doing.
You're doing, and you're doing so much all the time, and you're trying to just keep it together. And so I was just really intrigued, and then I saw like a lot of the, because I speak Arabic, the nurses told me stories which I don't know if they were supposed to tell me, because they took me aside and were like, we want you here. There were all these Sophie's Choice stories of like a mother having to choose between two kids. Was she saved?
Oh my God.
Like, I mean, like really, really painful stuff to hear. And then,
so all of that, the character that you created, played by Andrea Riseborough, is sort of like an amalgamation of all that weight.
Yeah.
All those stories accumulate, and then and therefore informs the character
Totally.
on when she's removed from the situation where it's no longer instinct, where she has time to reflect.
Yeah, she has to now like take it in.
Yeah.
And how do you? Because it's uncomfortable.
In your film, there's
like
what's interesting is you actually put flashcards, which are kind of like the type of thing that I would do is when I'm away for a week.
Yeah.
I scratch off things off the list, because the last thing you want to do is be in a very stagnant way.
Yes.
You just want to get out there and move. But
Yeah.
this space is so peculiar as a space, because once you've done one pyramid or one historical location, you've done them all in a way. At least that's my impression.
No, in LUXOR it's different, because every place. Well, actually, you know what? You're right in a way, because when I was 14, I was like so oversaturated by the time we had like gone to Aswan. I was like just like, I remember just being like, oh my God, I can't take any more of this in, you know? But I think when I went as her, when I was writing as her and thinking about like where this pain was in her, and like how I'm walking around, and it was never very literal. Now it's literal because I'm analyzing it with you, but yeah, like,
it's not an intellectual thing. It comes from the gut, and that's
yes, this film was written
Yeah.
completely from my gut and from my heartbreak, as well as like, how could the world become so toxic in such a short space of time, you know?
What I like most about this, I would call this observational cinema. The dialogue is not important. You could press the mute button and we wouldn't give a crap about that. It's about body language. It's about pushing things away, bringing them closer to you physically. And what I also appreciate is the fact that we were given a true sampling of hotel life. Hotel life they're such peculiar spaces. We're sitting in one right now, full of people, but as a guest, you don't care. Like, you can't bridge that connection. It's all false in a way.
It's true. That was a really big part when I wrote it. It was like hotel life. That's why I often showed the door of a hotel room, like, and how walking.
Yeah.
It's this monotony when you're on your own. Like, when I travel on my own, I feel the space a lot more than when I'm with my kids. Because they're like running and going crazy and breaking, like they actually break her kids, but like, you know, maybe someone's like jumping on a sofa, or I don't know what, you know, or they're shouting, like laughing and running when it's like late. But when you're on your own, or maybe my husband's talking about something he wants to see the next day. But when you're on your own and you're walking, you can just hear, and we do it in the film a lot. I don't know if you can hear like her clothes and the footsteps on the carpet. There was a lot of Foley for that. It was really important to me that you hear the shh, 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 because that's what you hear when you're on your own.
Her garb is very, you stand up and take notice as a viewer of her garb. It's I don't want to say unflattering.
Oh, it totally is.
But I mean, it reduces it. It's somewhat silly saying that, but it's almost as if she's wearing protective layers in a way. She's overdressed in a way.
Yes. So this is the thing. The costume. God, there's so much to talk about the costume. I love The Passenger, and The Passenger is a huge influence.
Antonioni, 1975. I was thinking about that film a lot.
Yeah, that's basically the massive inspiration. And Don't Look Now.
Okay.
Those are the two films that I like watch religiously, like literally every day. Because I feel like one really manages to like incorporate the psychic into the daily without it being like doo 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 doo. You know, like it was just really good, like solidly incorporated into the narrative without being hokey. And then The Passenger, it has that. I love that. I don't know if it's because my dad was like a war reporter or what it was. And that's probably what a lot of I put like that emotion like what with in the film. It's such a personal film in a way. But I loved watching him move in those spaces. And then her outfits were great because she was able to stand out.
Yeah.
Without it being obtrusive. So so we really thought about the color of the stone, and if she was in khakis it would look colonialist, and the last thing I want is an Orientalist film being from that part of the world. And it was already tricky because I'm using a very like English looking actress, although to be fair, as my mother pointed out, she could be Syrian because there's some Syrians that look like her. She has these huge blue eyes, you know, and like she does have full lips, so she could still be a Middle Eastern, but we weren't going for that. Like she definitely looks like she's an English doctor out there. So then what do you do with her like wardrobe? So we were like, okay, we're going to use these colors because they'll stand out and it will be beautiful.
Just to describe it, it's sort of like light pastels.
Yes.
And the slacks, like I want to say 1970s streetwear, let's say.
Yeah, basically, it's basically, imagine if you bought all your clothes in Kathmandu, Delhi, China, whatever like place where you're traveling and you're working, like, you know, that's where she bought them from. And she's not gonna like be vain about it because she's got other stuff to do, because she's constantly on the go and she's on this mission to like save things. And you know, when I travel, to be honest, when I'm traveling in places like that, I'm always looking like I'm a sack, because the last thing I want to do is draw attention to myself. You know, and that's kind of also where it was.
Jack Nicholson was purposely losing himself in that film.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the best part is that I have a lot of fashion friends, and they were like, "Oh my god, I love the fashion," and it was made me laugh so hard because it's only something. It is very niche and it is very specific, but the colors did work really beautifully together. And
there's a functionality about the clothes,
and there's like a style to them as well.
Yeah.
That kind of worked. But it was just, I don't know, I love that stuff. It wasn't meant to be that way, but I love that every fashion designer friend of mine that came was like, oh my god, or stylist friend was like, the wardrobe. So I found that quite funny because it was all about Kathmandu markets in my mind. And it was done by a Korean tailor. Like it wasn't like, you know.
Yeah, you didn't shop it at a whatever thrift shop or something. So anybody who speaks about this film is going to talk about the film's cathartic moment, where the character she lets loose. But I was more engaged. I was further engaged by that moment with the moment that follows it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really interesting choice. The actual time. The timing of that shot, because it's done with such quick efficiency, and it's almost as if we're turning the page on that emotion that she's feeling there. But when she's in it, fully in it, it gives so much dexterity to our understanding of that big cathartic moment. So I was wondering, was that a happy accident, or was that very
super deliberate? So most of the stuff you see is really deliberate. I think my English upbringing meant that I'm quite efficient with emotions, because I never like to see anything overdone. And you're talking about the dance scene and when she breaks down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So with the dance scene, at first she's just having a laugh. She shouldn't drink. She's already told you that. We've all had moments when we shouldn't be drinking because we're not like pretty like, you know, not in the best way. And she goes for it and she has a laugh, and then, you know, we've all been there. Like, you see a friend who's troubled, and they just take it a little too far, and then they get lost in the madness.
Delirious from mental fatigue.
Yes, and then she's just kind of is just exhausted. And then when she's walking up with him, she finally has this release. And it was really painful to watch. Actually, it was a very funny moment because her bodyguard, she had a bodyguard with her, was hiding in the room behind, and he didn't know what was happening. And Andrea is such a brilliant actress. She suddenly, like, so...
Yeah, I can picture.
So he was in the room with the door that opened, but no one was meant to be in there, but he didn't know. And it was like a very kind of, sometimes quite a haphazard production. So Andrea was like, had this breakdown. And then Kareem takes her into the room and closes the door. But Dave, the security guard, is there, and he's so upset by her performance that he starts crying.
Wow. Because
it was so powerful. She really produced something so insane that, like, literally Dave had no idea. He's like this big, like, Irish bodyguard just started crying.
Another filmmaker would have spent way too much time on that sequence.
I think it's the door that really helped, because we then held it on the door,
yeah,
and you could hear a little bit, but then I cut it, because if you heard it for too long, it was like,
yeah,
you just had to like do a little bit and then like let it go.
Let's end with something.
So I can talk for hours.
No, I know that. I love that. Thank you. Let's talk about the spirituality in this text.
Mm-hmm.
I get a sense that location is one thing that has its own, like there's a lot of foreigners that sort of like come to this land, but she sort of like dismisses a lot of the, how can I say this? Not occult, but she's like anti-horoscope or anti-card reader. Like she doesn't have time or place for that.
Yeah.
Yet she's surrounded by it, and at some point the character sort of like assumes that, yeah, maybe that's not for her, but she's very accepting of it.
She's gonna give it a shot.
Yeah, and it takes a while for her to get there. And when she gets there, it's because she's in a better place than she's reconnecting.
Yeah, she's trying. She's basically trying to fix herself, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna go for this, like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I find it so interesting, because someone asked me in a screening yesterday, they were like, well, why as a doctor would she do that? And I'm like, just because she's a doctor doesn't mean she doesn't understand that there could be something more spiritual around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the archaeologists really inspired me, because Salima Ikram, who played Salima, she told me that, I said to her, do you ever have any supernatural experiences? And she goes, any archaeologist who tells you they don't is lying. And I love that. Because this woman is a serious academic. She's like the #1 scholar. She was at Yale, she's at Cairo University, and she's telling me this, and I'm like, this is just the best information I could possibly get.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I of course, this is her trying to save herself. It's about taking control of yourself, and the guy's not going to save you. Like all these movies about the guy saving you is rubbish. And it creates like a problem for women as well, because then they get lazy and, you know, they think, oh, my relationship's saving you. It's like companionship is a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah.
But you've got to be strong in yourself. Otherwise, you're also going to be a really bad companion.
Those representations are so old. I'm so happy that we're moving away from that.
Yeah.
It's still taking a lot of time. Actually, I'll end with this. This is your sophomore feature. I don't necessarily want to know what your next projects are, but where do your curiosities lie? You started your own family. There's a little bit of displacement in your life. So like what are you in a mode where you just want to bring out politicized text, or maybe a feminist text, or
both? I think it's everything. Like I'm always layering. I can't separate because my life is so layered. And I think the interesting thing about how I work, what I'm realizing now, the interesting is that I layer things, and that's how I find the stories. So I find images or things that I like, and I somehow layer them like palimpsests, and then there's a story there, you know. And now that I've done it twice, people are getting that, like, okay, this is how she does it. So I'm like, see the 2 movies I've done, read this script, imagine how it would be, because I don't want to go through that sort of like, well, you know,
having to describe or define,
A, B, C, D plot stuff that drives me mad, and I get bored. You know, like I really get bored in a lot of films, and I drive anyone who goes to cinema with me mad. I'm also quite funny because sometimes I don't get plot. So my husband and my best friends always laugh at me because I'm like, what just happened? And like, it's basic plot saying that person, but I can't, when I'm watching a film sometimes, I'm so into the other details, which for me are what tells a story. That this like very generic modern day way of like being I just doesn't sink in, and I need someone to explain it to me.
You're more into the fabric or the tapestry or the contained emotions.
Yeah, look at my favorite, Antonioni, Don't Look Now, Fellini, Agnes Varda, all these people do it. I don't know why we have to stop filmmakers doing that, because I'm telling you, I've had development meetings, but I'm like, are they trying to crush my film or make me make a good film? And the thing about the 2 producers I worked with, which was so amazing, Paul Webster is a veteran, you know, like he like ran everything. He's done indie to studio, like won Oscars. The guy just looked at my script, and all he said is, you're scared here. Push it. What are you scared of? And then Mo, just like, you know, I think we need a little bit more here. Give me a little bit more. What are you doing? Give me a bit more. Please. I'm like, really, why? He goes, because I need it. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to feel this way. And I'm like, okay, fine. That's and then, you know, they're just so gentle with me, and just like giving in a way.
Yeah, it's not about concessions. It's about
lifting the work
and
pushing it to be brilliant, not to be like contain, fear.
Hey, this is Eric from myoncinema.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.